The SwellTech is actually one of the reasons why I started my channel to begin with, and let me explain why. So clear back in about May of 2020 is when I got turned on to surf skates, and I was watching a bunch of YouTube videos, and after about 6 months of research, I finally bought my first one, which is this Carver Tyler 777 with the CX trucks, which, as you know, is one of the most stable surf skate trucks out there. Then the next one I bought a few months later was this Carver Green Room with C7 trucks, which is also a relatively more stable truck. Then the third one I bought was a SwellTech, and it actually was the old Austin Keene model, which has a much narrower wheelbase than this, which makes it even more unstable for me. And all I was doing was watching YouTube videos, and they just have great riders riding this, and great riders make the SwellTech look like any other surf skate. So the very first time I stepped onto the SwellTech, I was absolutely shocked. I was wondering what twilight zone I had just entered in after coming off of those. And this was one of my first clues that maybe we need a little bit more education in this space to help people make buying decisions. So here's what we'll cover in this review. The first thing I want to do is just put the SwellTech in context with the top 10 surf skate trucks. After that, we're going to hear some reviews from some riders who I asked to help me out with this review because I can't ride this SwellTech nearly enough to do it justice. So we're going to hear from 3 surfers, Mark Baldwin, Ace Allan, and Joey Daley, and then also a non-surfer, Michal Mularski, who actually loves the SwellTech. So you're going to get that perspective from a non-surfer as well. After that, I'll go into some comparisons on 15 different variables so you can compare the SwellTech to all the other top 10 surf skate trucks. And then I'll finish by walking you through the technical aspects of the SwellTech. I'll walk you through the surf skate truck system as well as the whole complete model. After testing more than 70 surf skates with more than 30 different surf skate truck systems, I have boiled them down to what I believe are the top 10 surf skate trucks, which for me are the SwellTech, Curveboard, Smooth Star Thruster D, Kilo, SpiceSkate, Spice Pilot Type X, the Mularski, Carver C7, Waterborne Surf Adapter, Carver CX, and Slide. And I've organized them on a scale of what I call pure surf trainers on this side to street cruisers on this side. And what that means is the more you get on this side, the more you have loose, flowy, smooth surf skate trucks. And then the more you move this way, the trucks get tighter and snappier, and they're a little bit more versatile. You can do a little bit more with these street cruisers than you can with what I call these pure surf trainers. So for me, what I categorize as the pure surf trainers are the SwellTech, the Curveboard, the Smooth Star Thruster D, the Kilo, and the SpiceSkate Spice Pilot Type X. And then for me, the street cruisers are the Carver CX and the Slide. And then these 3 in the middle, the Mularski, the Carver C7, and the Waterborne Surf Adapter, I categorize as hybrids, by which I mean they can really do it all. They're great for the pure surf training, and they can also do the street cruising thing. They're more versatile. They give you a lot more forward momentum when you're pumping, so you can do longer distance cruising. So in this context, I put the SwellTech on the far left as the purest surf trainer. This has the loosest surf skate truck you'll ever find. And because the SwellTech is so unstable and hard to ride, for me, it's for advanced riders only. So if you're a non-surfer, the SwellTech is probably not going to be one of the first few that you put in your quiver, although I could be wrong because you're going to hear from Michal Mularski, who's a non-surfer and actually really loves the SwellTech. But that at least gives you kind of a frame of reference to start with.
Hey guys, my name is Mark. You might know me better from my own YouTube channel, Mark the Landlocked Surfer. I have been riding a SwellTech for about 1.5 years now. I've been surfing for 20 years, but it's not 20 years consistently. Let's say 1 year of surf experience, but spread out over 20 years. I have around 30 surf skates in my quiver, so I have a pretty good basis for comparison with the major surf skate brands anyways.
I'm Ace Allan, and I've been surfing for over 20 years. I've been riding a couple SwellTechs for the past few months, and I've ridden pretty much most of the top surf skate brands on the market.
Hi, my name is Michal. I've been riding surfskates for 2 years. I'm not a surfer, so you have to take that under the consideration. Out of those 2 years, I've been riding SwellTech for about a year. I also have in my quiver Smooth Star, Yao, Thruster 2, and OVNI series from Brazil. Last 2 years had like chance to try Carver CX and also Slide. Yeah.
To me, it feels the most like surfing. There's something about the fluidity of the movement, the way you have to use your upper body to initiate your turns, that just to me, I can picture myself being on a wave riding up and down the green face in a way that I don't get the same feeling with some other surf skates.
I'd say number one would be the front truck. And even though for me it's a little bit quirky, it's different. There's some innovation going on here that we don't see with the other surf skates on the market. Next would be how it performs. It performs in the bowl pretty well, actually. And then the third one would be the shape of the board, the aesthetics. And it just looks like a mini surfboard, kind of.
You pretty much feel like you're on the water, as far as I can tell. That creates like that unique experience, really, really fun to ride, and I really enjoy it. And second reason is that SwellTech forces you to use your whole body to ride this board. On other board, I can be a little bit, sloppy with my technique, or it's just take it easy. SwellTech, no, that's not the case. It's just you pretty much have to be, focus and use your upper body, just to twist it, to make those turns, cutbacks or whatever. I really like that. It's just the wiggling doesn't really work.
In my opinion, if you figure out how to utilize the front truck properly, as per se an advanced rider would be able to, it would progress their surfing. It does replicate surfing, however, it replicates it so much that I feel like anyone from beginner to intermediate would have a difficult time learning the fundamentals or the beginning of surf skating. So one thing I should mention about the SwellTech is that you utilize your back foot a lot more than your front foot, which does replicate surfing a lot. However, in my opinion, it kind of defeats the purpose of getting that line drive because you're not getting any momentum from the front. If I were to pump the back, the front would use that momentum to gain the drive and the speed that I would need to go forward or down the line. A lot of the other surf skates give you the capability of putting more pressure towards the front of the board, whereas if you put too much pressure on the front, it's going to jackknife.
I think that SwellTech is the closest to the sensation of surfing. I think the fluidity of the motion of that front truck really helps. The fact that the shape has the stomp pad at the back, maybe your feet feel a little bit more familiar. I can get into my normal surf stance. All that together just makes it feel like I'm surfing.
Surfers all have a different style. We all like different boards. We like different types of waves. Because of that difference, we all have different opinions. But for me, it doesn't really replicate surfing too well. The feel of it, of riding the SwellTech, is very different to what I feel when riding a wave and riding a surfboard.
As I said, I'm not a surfer, but I've got some boat experience, and for me, it feels basically like I'm on the water.
I don't think I'm qualified to answer that question. I think you would need to check with somebody who surfs regularly, who might be using one board as a dedicated trainer to then apply it onto the ocean. With me, between times that I get to surf, I use so many different systems, I do so many different things, I ride so many different ways, that it would be hard to say that it's attributed to one specific board or one training exercise. I think SwellTech does theoretically make a really good surf trainer because the way it feels like surfing, whether that necessarily corresponds to making your surfing better or potentially developing bad habits from the surf skate, I can't say for sure.
For me, I don't think it is the best surf trainer. It seems to me a little bit quirky. It feels more like a balance trainer, and that might have a lot of benefit actually, because balance is really important in surfing, but it doesn't seem to simulate the same type of feeling that I get when I'm riding a surfboard on a wave.
First of all, I really don't like, those statements, this is the best. You can basically do the same maneuvers all other boats. Is it going to work for you? That's the question, it's just that only you can answer. It's just, it works for me. I know only two other, SwellTech riders, and one of them is actually a surfer, and he was using the SwellTech to come back from the injury. And I asked him, why are you riding SwellTech? He said, because that's the only one that feels like my shortboard. And he even didn't want to try another board. He said, I'm not riding anything. I'm just riding SwellTech purely for the surf training.
SwellTech is definitely one of the trickier boards to get good with because it is so loose and divey. You can bottom it out if you just go the wrong way. It's got the truck that spins all 360 degrees around. It just has a lot less of the stability that some other boards that are more similar to a skateboard feel like. So what sets it apart is that it's harder to master, but once you do get the hang of it, it feels really good. So it's kind of on the top side of the surf skates in terms of ease of use, but also has a lot of really good potential.
It's unique not only in the aesthetics of it, but also in the feel of that front truck. That feel for some might not be very good. I don't enjoy it the most, but it's something different.
There was everything else, and there was a SwellTech. Because of the unique feel of the board. My Smooster Manta, which I modified the front track, I believe that I can easily match the turning radius of SwellTech, or even probably outperform it. But the feel is different. Whenever I just step on the SwellTech, I know that I step on the SwellTech. It's just if I just riding, Yao or Smooster, it's just the feel is different. Probably the closest one was the OVNI from Brazil, which is also, spring-based, very, very loose.
It is a complete and utter surf trainer specific, in my opinion.
And is it for beginner, intermediate, or advanced riders?
Advanced only, in my opinion. I feel like if a beginner steps on this, they're going to probably break an ankle. Advanced surfers, I feel like, would love this dearly just because it's a challenge.
To me, I think if you're someone who is most interested in surfing and want to replicate that feeling, or you want to get the feeling of surfing, then that's the right board for you. If you are looking for just cruising around, or if you're looking for riding the skate park as someone who's more beginner or intermediate, it's going to be more challenging. It's not the greatest board for cruising long distance because it's more difficult to push and it takes a little bit more effort to get a return on your motions. So I think I would choose a different option if that's what you're looking for. But if you're looking for getting the feeling of surfing, then this is the right board in my opinion.
I'd recommend the SwellTech for someone who just wants something different. Again, has a very different feel that's sometimes, for me, it's not the best.
I would say that if you like really loose systems, and if you like, feel like you're surfing, and also, just this looseness, it just force you to use your arm, whole body, just to make this board moving.
I think that if you already have some skateboarding experience and you're a surfer or you have some surf experience, you could definitely learn with a SwellTech as your first board. People sometimes make it out to be harder than it is. I think as long as you have the basics down, you can learn. It might be a little bit of a slower progress, but you can definitely get up to expert level, even if it's your first board. If you've never even stood on a longboard or a regular skateboard before, and you're just trying to get into surf skating, I think it will be a little bit more challenging and maybe even discouraging when you're starting out, because it's going to take you longer to get the basics down of just pushing and stopping and getting those simple turns down before you start pumping and carving.
In general, I wouldn't recommend that surfers start on the SwellTech. If you don't have any other surf skates, I'd recommend you to buy one of the other top brands like Carver or Waterborne or Smooth Star or Yao. They have, again, very different feeling from what you'll get on the SwellTech. This feeling on the SwellTech isn't what I feel when I'm surfing.
I saw those reviews on the internet that is super difficult to ride and you have to be super good. I had a chance of trying first time the SwellTech, and I didn't really have a major problem, just riding it. If you surf, I don't think you will have any problem riding the SwellTech. If you're starting and you don't have any board experience, I believe that you can just unlock this board, relatively quickly. Maybe it takes a little bit longer, just than other boards like Cover, all those, Slide, which are, very stable.
I don't like the fact that it jackknifes. No point should I ever touch the ground with the board unless both wheels are coming off. If I can jackknife, that's an ankle, that's my elbows, that's my hands. I gotta save myself every time that the board touches the ground. If I'm not an advanced rider, I can't get the actual flow going. Most likely, what's gonna happen is someone's gonna go to do a turn and they're gonna fall. When it comes to surfing, you're gonna be dipping your edge into the water, but you're gonna fall into water. You're not gonna fall onto the concrete, and that's a huge aspect that I think about when I'm trying to ride. If you're going straight down a hill and you hit a rock at any point, this jars back and forth. In my opinion, it doesn't have the pumpability, so you can't actually drive from a standstill. You can't go from a stop and start pumping and get speed or velocity. You kind of have to wiggle it out before anything.
So what I don't like about the SwellTech, when you lean on the SwellTech, if you lean too far, it buckles, it gives, and there's no resistance at all. And it's a very difficult thing to find out where that point is that it will happen.
There's one main thing that I dislike about SwellTech, and that is that they have the proprietary sizing on their truck systems. I love to customize boards and find out what works. I also use quick trucks so that when I travel, I can take different truck systems for different applications. And because SwellTech uses a proprietary bolt pattern that doesn't match normal skateboard decks or doesn't match the quick truck plates, then I don't use it as much as I would like to.
The deck. I mean, I like aesthetically it looks like a surfboard, but the tail for me is too small. It's too short and too narrow for two reasons. Firstly, I've got large feet, so I just really like it's just to have like a support on my back feet, and I had difficulties to drop in because of the short tail, and I couldn't lock the board properly on a coping.
As with almost everybody, I've had experience with the springs breaking. I haven't used the new mag springs, so those are supposed to be a little bit more resilient, but I have had the springs break on me for apparently no reason, like it wasn't anything exceptionally difficult and they just snap. They're also difficult to replace. I actually snapped one when trying to replace it.
A few weeks it starts squeaking, so I just want to put like a grease in a pivot cap. They attached the springs from the front and put the grease, and it took me 2 days to put the springs back. I tried to do it and took me 45 minutes or try and error. I couldn't put the spring back. I gave up because I thought so that I'm probably going to break the spring. So I started searching on the internet. Then I finally found someone showing the way how he's doing it. I just adopt that technique. So it was 2 days of researching, really frustrating because I really wanted to ride that board.
Give us that option of having customizable parts. So I like to do grinds. I would love to replace the hanger with something that doesn't have the kingpin that sticks out. And I would like to be able to use it on my whale shark deck without having to re-drill custom holes.
I would appreciate decks with the wider tails and longer tails. And secondly, just make some spring change proper video, post it on your website.
And the first variable is truck feel, by which I mean, is it more on the loose, fluid, flowy side, or does it feel more tight and snappy? And as you can see on this SwellTech, this is on the outer ranges of the loose, flowy, and fluid side of things, because this does a full 360-degree range of motion. And speaking of that, the next variable is range of motion, which, as you can see, this actually has more range of motion than any other surfskate truck you're going to find, for better or for worse, because that actually makes it very unstable. The next variable is rail-to-rail lean, and that's actually an interesting one for the SwellTech, because even though it has wider range of motion than any of these others, it actually has relatively low rail-to-rail lean because the truck jackknifes if you turn it too sharp. And I'm going to just demonstrate this, but I have these organized by what I feel has the highest rail-to-rail lean on this side, all the way down to what has the lowest rail-to-rail lean. So here's the Al Mularski, which out of these top 10, I believe has the greatest rail-to-rail lean. Here's the waterborne surf adapter, which also has a lot of rail-to-rail lean, especially when you add the rail adapter, which this model does not have the rail adapter. Next, we have the Spice Pilot Type X. Next, we have the Carver C7. Next, we have the Carver CX. Then the Smooth Star Thruster D. Then the Aquilo. And now we have the SwellTech, which as I said is interesting because you have about this range of motion on this, which is not a lot of rail-to-rail lean relatively. And then if you lean too sharply, what happens is this truck jackknifes like that. And so it's kind of paradoxical because even though you have a lot of range of motion on this, you can't really access all of it. And now we have the slide. And then finally we have the curve board, which out of all these I think has the least amount of rail-to-rail lean. The next variable is forward momentum. How much forward momentum does it generate when you pump it? And on that point, I'm going to say the SwellTech is on the lower end of that. It really does not generate a lot of forward momentum when you pump. If you want a lot of forward momentum, you want to be more on this side of the scale, on these street cruisers or these hybrids. The next variable is stability. And on that point, the SwellTech is far and away the least stable of anything that you see here. And then the next variable is suitable skill level, beginner to advanced, and on that point, because it's so unstable, I'm going to say that the SwellTech is for advanced riders only. Unless you're looking for a challenge, because you're going to hear from Michal Mularski, who started out on the SwellTech as a non-surfer and not an advanced rider, and ended up really loving it. The next variable is best use, by which I mean, is this a pure surf trainer, is it a street cruiser, or is it a hybrid, can it do it all? And as I've already said, I categorize this as a pure surf trainer. And by that I mean, it's best used in small areas on smooth surfaces. It's really not great for traveling long distances or over rougher surfaces. The next variable is wheelbase offset, and on that point the SwellTech is not great. It's one of the ones that has the most wheelbase offset, which means that you have to have a longer deck to accommodate your stance width on a SwellTech. And this is a very critical point on the SwellTech, because if you get a model that has too narrow of a wheelbase for your stance width, that's going to make it even more unstable than it already is. So you really got to make sure that you get the right wheelbase for your stance width on the SwellTech. The next variable is weight. And even though the SwellTech, technically just the truck itself, isn't one of the heaviest trucks, because everything is proprietary on a SwellTech system and you have to use their complete system, the whole complete system with the length of the board and the way it's all built, these are actually fairly heavy systems, relatively speaking. The next variable is suitable riding distance, by which I mean, can you go short distances or long? And I'm going to say that the SwellTech is best used short distances, small areas, smooth surfaces. It's really not a great long distance cruiser, because if you go any distance, you're going to be hitting cracks and bumps and rougher surfaces. And you can see that how this truck, if you hit cracks and bumps, it really squirrels out on you. And so for that reason, that's why I don't ride it for distance. The next variable is suitable riding surfaces, which, as I just said, for me, the SwellTech is smooth surfaces only. You don't want to be hitting cracks and bumps and rough surfaces on that truck. The next variable is versatility, and on that point, as I've already said, I don't think the SwellTech is great. I think it's a very specialized board for pure surf training for surfers. The next variable is quality, and on that point, I would rank the SwellTech very well. I think that everything you find in the SwellTech is pretty high quality. They're going to last you a long time. Which leads us to the next variable of maintenance, and I personally haven't ridden the SwellTech enough to really have any maintenance issues, but the one thing that you will hear people talk about is that these springs can break. And so that's, I think, a fairly common issue. And I should also point out that they've recently upgraded their springs. These springs are stronger now than their older ones, so that should eliminate a lot of that issue as well. And then the final variable is cost. And on that point, the SwellTech is actually great. It's one of the cheapest options that you see up here. At the time of making this, you can get a SwellTech system for between $219 and $279. So the first thing I want to point out about how the SwellTech is built is that pretty much everything you see on the SwellTech is unique, custom, proprietary to SwellTech. So starting with, look on the front here, you see that the front chuck has a very unique 3-bolt pattern. And so you can see here where those screws are going in right there. That's obviously unlike anything you've ever seen, and that means that you can't use the SwellTech on any other deck unless you're drilling your own holes. And then the rear truck is also custom to SwellTech as well. These holes are much wider than you see on most. So for example, here is a rear of a carver so that you can see how much bigger the SwellTech is comparatively on that rear truck. And then of course you have the pad on the back here that you don't see on anything else. So when it comes to buying a SwellTech, you can't just buy the truck and put it on any other system. You have to buy the whole complete system, and I guess that could be a good thing or a bad thing. If you like their whole complete system, then it's a good thing, but if you don't like it, well, then you're kind of stuck with what they're using here and you don't have a lot of options for customizing things. Now let's take a closer look at this front truck, and I'll actually take this off the deck so we can look underneath here. But just looking at it on the surface, you can see how it has this range of motion here, which, as we pointed out, has a 360-degree range of motion. And then you'll also see how there is an adjustment nut right here for these springs, and that's because you can adjust this movement as well. So the SwellTech is a dual axis system with 2 dimensions of motion. So now let's take this front truck off and look underneath there. So here you can see their custom riser, which again is just all proprietary, all custom to SwellTech. And now here's the truck, and let's look underneath here to see how this is built. And I'm not going to take this all apart. I just wanted to visually show you this. I wanted to show you how they're getting that 360-degree range of motion. So you can see how that's turning like so, and then at some point it'll do a hard kind of transfer right there.